First up, former Army Chief and Union Minister General V.K. Singh has hit out at the Army Tribunal for quashing the court-martial of Lieutenant General P.K. Rath in the Sukna land scam. The tribunal's decision had put the general in a spot as he was the one who had initiated the inquiry against Lieutenant General P.K. Rath in the land scam case. Hitting out at the tribunal, General V.K. Singh called the decision dubious after the Rath camp has once again shot back, accusing V.K. Singh of personal vendetta.
When he took over the Indian Army, he said his mission was to clean up the internal health. But this order of the Armed Forces Tribunal suggests that that move seems to have backfired. General Singh, thank you so much for the time. What were your first thoughts when you read this?
See, I haven't read it fully. What I've read is what has been put out by the media. And my first reaction was, normally judgments talk about a case, an issue. Here the judgment gives more time on individual rather than the issue. Please take your mind back to 2009 when this happened. It was an open and shut case. It was a case where a corps commander had said land adjoining the cantonment, because of security considerations, he is not going to give an NOC. Matter was conveyed to the state government. He goes away, 6-7 months down the line, General Rath, the new corps commander, conveys to the state government that he can give the land, right? He doesn't tell the higher headquarters. He goes on his own. That's a different thing that I believe he is, in his petition he said he told the higher headquarters. If that had been the case, the General Court Martial would have taken a different decision. In this case, he's gone through Court of Inquiry, a General Court Martial. He had all the time. He had a lawyer who fought his case. He did every possible thing, and then the General Court Martial gave a decision. Now, the AFT gives a decision. I don't know on what considerations. My understanding is that you have a retired High Court judge who is assisted by a retired armed forces officers. What these officers have explained to the judge is what he will form his ideas on. And my feeling is that somewhere there is travesty of justice.
So you've also been, since you said this judgment spends a lot of time talking about you as such and your role, it's been said that you've actually destroyed the career of an honest officer who had the interest of the army in mind. He wanted to make a school out there which the students would study, the army officers would benefit. What do you have to say on that, sir?
There were institutions which were coming up in that area. There were hostels and housing colony that was coming up in that area. So anybody who gives this, false thing that I only was looking at a school, a girls' school where there's a field area, how many people are staying there? What was going to be the fees of this school? It was falsely said that it is going to be affiliated to the Mayo College, which said, no, we have nothing to do with it. Then people ran around to get affiliation of... So what are we talking of?
Very dubious, you mean to say?
Absolutely dubious.
ये जो राय AFT ने दिया है, it shows कि लेफ्टिनेंट जनरल रथ सही थे, सही है, सही रहेंगे, और ये जो जनरल बीके सिंह का जो एक षड्यंत्र था टू मलाइन हिम बिकॉज उनका जो डिप्टी चीफ का अपॉइंटमेंट हो गया व्हाइल बीके सिंह वाज द ईस्टर्न कमांड चीफ कमांडर थे, उनका थोड़ा उनको सही नहीं लगा, इसीलिए ये केस वाज क्रिएटेड बिकॉज ही वाज देयर. उन्होंने उनको सब पता था कि लैंड आर्मी का नहीं है, लैंड प्राइवेट पार्टी को दिया है वेस्ट बंगाल गवर्नमेंट ने.
The land scam case had come to light in 2008. Senior army officers were accused of influencing the decision to issue an NOC to a Siliguri-based private builder on a 70-acre plot adjacent to the cantonment in Sukna. Lieutenant General Rath was then found guilty in the scam on 3 counts. It was for the first time in the history of the Indian Army that a serving Lieutenant General had been found guilty in a scam and court-martialed. However, a military tribunal has now quashed the court-martial of former Lieutenant General P.K. Rath and imposed a fine of 1 lakh rupees on the army for wrongly accusing an honorable officer in a scam. Let's get in a word from our correspondent Jugal Purohit, who's tracking this big story for us. Jugal, General V.K. Singh sticking to his stand, saying that Lieutenant General V.K. Rath had what he did was unethical. But as far as the verdict of the Army Tribunal is concerned, it's final.
Well, Simi, there are two things out here. The first is that the AFT's judgment, the order which came in yesterday, it isn't the final word on the subject because as is known, the Defence Ministry, which was in this case one of the respondents, is known to go into appeal against every order which does not suit itself in the Armed Forces Tribunal. So perhaps this one too shouldn't be different. We will have to wait and watch what the MOD does. But insofar as this order itself is concerned, Simi, what it brings out is that the Indian Army seems to be a divided house. There are camps within the Indian Army. There are officers who are not, they're not loyal to their bosses. They're not loyal to their words. This is a sordid tale of turncoats and promotions being used in a sense to, seek favors from officers. And in the end, if this Armed Forces Tribunal report has to be believed, it says that an Eastern Army commander, a Lieutenant General, initiates the entire thing, instigates the entire inquiry against General Rath, then becomes the Chief of Army Staff with all the influence at his command. He ensures that General P.K. Rath's career, his tenure is all ruined, and he's made to exit the force in a dishonored way. One doesn't really know, because as General V.K. Singh has said, he highly contests the findings of this report. He's in fact gone on to cast aspersions on this report, saying that it's a judge who delivers the report, but there is a senior armed forces retired officer who's there to assist, and very often it all depends on what the judge is fed from the side of the armed forces member on the tribunal to finally influence the decision. So it's a very bitterly fought situation. But if this judgment of the tribunal has to be believed, it paints an extremely sordid saga of the Indian Army, right. And it does seem that there is a lot to be done insofar as keeping their own house in order before the Indian Army can talk about bigger things. Absolutely. Like facing the enemy and combat.
Absolutely. Jugal, stay on with us. We're also being joined by General Deepak Kapoor on the phone line. Thanks so much for speaking to Headlines today. General Kapoor, your first reaction about the Army Tribunal giving a clean chit to Lieutenant General Rath in the Lance Camp case, and General V.K. Singh saying it's a setback to the fight against corruption.
All I can say is I'm happy that the Armed Forces Tribunal has exonerated General Rath of any wrongdoing, and I'm glad it has happened, because it is good for the image of the army, which stood tarnished to some extent because of whatever allegations were made against him. So, and it is good that the army rank and file would have greater faith and confidence in their senior officers as a result of this decision of the Armed Forces Tribunal.
General Kapoor, you're saying it's good for the image of the army that Lieutenant General P.K. Rath has gotten a clean chit, but what does it say about General V.K. Singh, who had initiated the inquiry against Lieutenant General Rath?
I would not like to comment on that. Let General V.K. Singh introspect himself, whether everything is well or not. That is for him to have introspect about.
All right. Thanks so much, General Deepak Kapoor, for speaking to Headlines today. The controversy rages on as now Union Minister V.K. Singh has said that this is a huge setback for the fight against corruption.